I'm coming before you because this may be my very last broadcast. Because of the UN resolution that was passed that anyone living in the pre-1967 line that was Israel at 1967, anyone living in what they called the occupied area, which they call the occupied area now, is a war criminal. At any point, I could be getting off a plane in Europe. I could be arrested and charged with war crimes because, ladies and gentlemen, I lived in this area that the UN passed a resolution, this area of Jerusalem, that now I am technically a war criminal. And there are, of course, hundreds of thousands of people that can be charged with war crimes under the United Nations and incarcerated and, perhaps even put to death. I'm not sure exactly what the intent is, but until all Jews are expunged from the face of the planet, the UN resolutions will continue. To help us to understand what this settlement means and to tell us about an early Jewish settler, we have Nehemia Gordon with us. Nehemia, thanks for being with us.
Did you know that there was a Jewish settler 2,000 years ago, and they use this word settler, which is a Jew who lives on land that the Jews have conquered from their enemies, and they use this word to demonize people, but there was an ancient Jewish settler named Yeshua of Nazareth.
Oh, and tell us about this this evil settler.
Yeah, well, people think I'm joking when I say Yeshua was a settler, but he literally was a settler, and Joseph's grandfather was a settler who had, there's the story in the New Testament. It's the Christmas story where they go back to Bethlehem for the census. And a lot of modern scholars who don't believe in the New Testament will say, well, that's all contrived. Why would somebody be going back to Bethlehem if he's from Nazareth? And it's a very simple answer. They weren't from Nazareth. If you went back before the year 105 BC, then the Nazareth was in an area called Galil HaGoyim, the Galilee of the Gentiles. And it had been called that since the time when Hiram and Solomon had made an alliance, and Solomon gave 20 cities to Hiram of Tyre, and he basically turned over the Galilee to the people of Tyre and Sidon. And since that time, it was called Galil HaGoyim, the Galilee of the Gentiles. That's how it's referred to in the book of Isaiah. And it's in that very place that in the year 105 BC, one of the Maccabee kings named Aristobulus I, he conquers the Galilee of the Gentiles, and he does something really interesting. Let me read this to you from Josephus. It says, Aristobulus made war against Etruria. That was that area. There was a tribe there called the Etrurians, who were a Greek tribe, and added a great part of it to Judea, and compelled the inhabitants, if they would continue in that country, to be circumcised and to live according to the Jewish laws. And this is actually something unprecedented in Jewish history. Aristobulus I forcibly converted the Greeks of Galilee to be Jews. That didn't happen any other time in history. It's very unusual. But from the time 105 BC, when the Jews conquer Etruria in the Galilee, then there is this flood of Jewish settlers who come up from the south. And one of those families was the family of Joseph, who came from Bethlehem and settled in the Galilee, in Nazareth. And I've heard this from people. They'll say, well, there is no such town as Nazareth. It's not a real town. It's never mentioned in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament, because it didn't exist. It was a Jewish settlement.
That's right. And tell us, why was it called Nazareth? What is it in Hebrew? What does it really mean?
Well, it's from the word netzer, and netzer is a branch that comes out of an olive tree. And if you go there to this day, to that area, you'll see all these olive trees, and it's the little branches coming out that form a separate tree out of the same root system. And of course, that references Isaiah chapter 11, verse 2, verse 2. A netzer shall come out of Jesse. It's verse 1. And but here's the important thing. So we have hints of Yeshua being a Jewish settler in the New Testament. So we have this scene where Peter is denying Yeshua. And he says, no, I don't even know that guy. I've never met him. And it appears in, let's see, it's in the New Testament. It's in Matthew 26:73. And after a while, they came unto Peter and to him that stood by and said to Peter, surely thou art also one of them, for thy speech bewrayeth thee. I don't know what that means in English.
Well, I've got it right here. It's Incident 187 in the Chronological Gospels. Bereath, what does it mean? After a while, those that stood by said, surely you are also one of them. Your speech betrays you. I put it in more modern English there, but same meaning.
So what does he mean, your speech betrays you? They knew from his accent that he was a Galilean. And when you read the New Testament, you have no idea what that means until you read in Josephus that the original indigenous inhabitants, and indigenous by, I mean, before Aristobulus I in 105 BC, the inhabitants of the Galilee were these Etrurian Greeks. And the Greeks don't have certain sounds that we have in Hebrew. And so when these Greeks converted to Judaism and spoke Hebrew, it sounded different from the Hebrew of a Judean, from a Judean settler. And we have this great passage in the Talmud. I have a teaching about this on my website called Netanyahu Schools the Pope. I won't go into all of it. It's really exciting stuff. But there's this great passage in the Talmud where the rabbis are mocking the Galileans. And they say as follows. They say the Judeans are exact in their language and the Galileans are not exact in their language. And what they mean is that the Judeans have a different accent that distinguishes different sounds in Hebrew, which in the Galilean speech of Peter and these other people who lived among the Etrurians, and maybe their ancestors were Etrurians. Talk about, Michael, a picture of the nations being grafted into Israel that you have later developed in the New Testament. It's possible that Peter's ancestors weren't direct descendants of Jacob, but that they were people who joined the people of Israel in the time of Aristobulus I. And that's why they spoke differently with a different accent. But Yeshua was a settler among them, and he and his family, that's why they went back to Bethlehem, because they were Jewish settlers. They weren't originally from Nazareth. They were from Bethlehem. And to demonize Jewish settlers, well, I guess we're in good company. Right? We've been settling the land. You know, there's this unbelievable speech given by Jeremiah Wright, who was Obama's pastor for over 20 years.
Yeah, one of the brilliant men of our day and time.
He has this speech where he says the Jews have been stealing the land from the Palestinians since the time of the judges because they believe their God gave it to them. Wait a minute. We're all agreeing that we've been settlers stealing land since, 1400 BC? Are you kidding me? So how are we not the indigenous population of the land? And one of the places this comes up, Michael, is the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in Qumran, which is a town that was liberated by Israel in 1967. The world calls that occupied territory. So according to the international community, the Dead Sea Scrolls are property of the Palestinian people, and the place they were found is really Palestine. Now, wait a minute. The Dead Sea Scrolls are written in Hebrew by Jews, not in Arabic by Arabs. We're not an occupying power. We are the indigenous population.
Thank you for supporting Nehemia's McCore Hebrew Foundation. Learn more at NehemiasWall.com.